College students, what's the craziest thing that ever happened in your dorm? Across the hall from me lived Ron and Todd. They were not a good match. Ron was basically an overweight hippie and Todd was on the football team. The funny thing about it was that it was Todd who drove Ron crazy, not the other way around. Todd basically didn't care about Ron's antics. But Ron couldn't stand sharing his dorm room with a straight edge. So after a few months, Ron cooks up a plan to get Todd out of the room. One night, in the middle of the night, Todd wakes up. The blinds in the room have been pulled open, and it's light enough to see in the room. Ron is standing in the middle of the room, naked, painting a huge mural on the wall that has the door on it. As Ron moves from area to paint, he skips and quietly sings to himself. Ron also paints himself, little paint for the wall, little paint for Ron. After 5+ minutes of watching this scene from his bed with growing disbelief and horror, Todd says something, and Ron turns slowly to face Todd, skips over to Todd's bed, kisses Todd full on the lips, and says, "Go back to sleep, Todd. You're dreaming." Todd is just sleepy enough to find this somewhat convincing, so he rolls over. Also, what else is he going to do? Fight his naked, paint-covered roommate? The next morning, Todd wakes up, and there's no mural anywhere in the room, no paint on the floor, no paint on any of Ron's bedclothes, and Ron is fast asleep in his bed, wearing a t-shirt. Todd wakes Ron up and asks if anything odd was going on in their room last night. Ron replies that he had a chemistry test that wiped him out, so he just came straight home and went to bed and had been asleep until Todd woke him up. So now Todd doesn't know what to think, but the best answer appears to be that he had a homoerotic dream about his roommate being a painting setter. So Todd notes the fuck out of the dorm room and gets reassigned. It made no sense to the rest of us either, until much later when we were having a beer in Ron's room. He asked us if we wanted to see something cool. Sure, we did, so he shut off all the lights and then turned on a lamp hidden near his bed with a black light. All of a sudden, a massive, glowing mural appeared on the wall with the door on it, and all over Ron's sheets and comforter, and Ron just started laughing his full ass off. And that's how Ron got a room to himself. And now, on to the next story, story 2. Doctors have read it. When were you happy that a patient didn't follow your advice? One of the most obese patients I've ever seen in my career as a physician was recently admitted to my clinic. He begged me to treat his stomach pain because most doctors would take one good look at him and essentially say that all he needed to do was lay off the MC chickens. Another doctor diagnosed him with diabetes without running any tests and gave him medication for it. But the patient didn't have diabetes, so his blood sugar levels dropped dangerously low. When he went back to tell his doctor what happened, the doctor just said, "Look at you, you obviously have diabetes," and discharged him, instead of turning him away. I ran a thorough exam to find out what the problem in his stomach was. When the results came back, I found out he was at risk of fatty liver disease. It's often hard to catch because it's a silent killer, but symptoms like fatigue, abdominal pain, and brain fog are signs that you're at risk of fatty liver. When I told my patient this, he said that he had been experiencing all of those symptoms for months, but he never knew why. I was grateful that I was able to notice he was at risk before it progressed too far. If it had led to scarring of the liver known as cirrhosis, it would have been too late to save him. I've lost 10 of my patients this way. But luckily there's an easy way to tell if you're at risk of fatty liver disease. You just have to measure the circumference around your waist in inches, right at the level of your belly button. If that measurement is more than half of your height, you're at risk of having a fatty liver. A ratio of 0.4 is best, while a 0.5 puts you at risk. I was very worried about my patient because over the past 5 years, there's been an increase in people with a ratio higher than 0.5, and he was one of them. As of right now, 25 of Americans have a fatty liver, and that's because when our diets get worse, excess fat builds in our livers. I was terrified that my patient would also contribute to that statistic because of his condition, though I never could have guessed that he would change how I treated fatty liver from then on. At the time, I was just concerned for his health because the only medication I knew to prescribe was basically useless. So I told him that the only real way to reverse fatty liver was for him to change his lifestyle. I always tell this to my patients, but I'm always met with the same defiance because of how hard they think it is to change their lifestyle. You may think it's easy, but how would you feel if you were told that you can't eat fast food anymore? Not so happy, right? Well, almost all of my patients feel the same way, which is why their livers end up in critical condition. So I prescribed my patient with medication and warned him that if he didn't adapt to a healthier lifestyle, I would be seeing him again in a coffin. Ironically, the best way I learned to treat fatty liver disease came from this patient. 3 months passed and my patient did end up coming back. To say I was relieved was an understatement. Right away, I noticed that he had lost some weight and seemed energetic, which was a significant improvement from his previous depressed state. I wondered if he had effectively changed his lifestyle, or if by some miracle the medication I had prescribed him worked. He told me that the pain in his stomach had subsided and that he was going on daily walks because his brain fog and fatigue weren't an issue anymore. I asked him if he had changed his diet like I suggested, and he said that he had. He said that since he lost some weight, his body wasn't calling out for processed foods anymore, so he was eating cleaner. 3 months ago, I was anxious that he would develop cirrhosis and afraid that he wouldn't live much longer. But I was happy I could finally put those negative thoughts to rest because my patient was on the right track to a healthy liver. I congratulated him on his results and told him I was pleased the medication had actually been useful for him. That's when he revealed something that made my jaw drop. He said he had never gone to pick up his prescription because he was taking an everyday liver vitamin every morning instead, and it was the only real reason he was able to change his diet in the first place. I admitted that I had never come across that medication before. So, he told me that he found out about the vitamin because of an article saying an extract blend of bergamot citrus and inner life could regress the progression of fatty liver. That's why he decided to try that out instead. He then left me stumped when he confirmed that most of the results I saw from him today were because of the everyday liver vitamin. That explained why I had never seen this kind of result in a patient with a fatty liver, especially not in 3 months. Later that day, I researched the main ingredients in the everyday liver vitamin and was impressed that my patient had found this because the extract blend he was talking about was patented bergamot. Bergamot has studies stating that it reduces the fat in the liver, fights the damaged tissue cells in the liver that led to cirrhosis, and reduces chronic inflammation in the liver. If you have some time, I would recommend looking into these studies because there's so much more information about how bergamot has the ability to help reduce liver fat and body weight, especially since not even the medication I prescribed him at bergamot, or even studies as promising as that ingredient. This is because the everyday liver vitamin is the only supplement on the market with this ingredient, along with 15 other ingredients that studies show are good for the liver. Since then, I've been vouching for the everyday liver vitamin to my patients with fatty liver, hoping they could make the same recovery he had. We should all be taking something like this, because we aren't going to stop consuming processed foods anytime soon, so might as well prevent this liver disease in the future. And I was glad I didn't send this patient away because I also looked at him and thought he was diabetic. And now, on to the next story, story 3. I married my high school bully. She was the popular girl in high school and I was the super tall, awkward lesbian. We were on the volleyball team together and she would always get on to me for messing up. She was never friendly to me and would always leave me out of things intentionally. I hated her personality but always had the hots for her and fantasized about her despite her treatment of me. She was beautiful and everything. I wasn't cool and confident. I was 1 year above her throughout high school. I graduated in 2015 and her in 2016, during my senior year. I made some big plays during a big game and she sort of began warming up to me. After school one day I walked past her and her boyfriend as they were getting into a huge argument. He was getting into her face and nobody else was around. I could feel something really bad was about to happen, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. I walked over to him and told him to back off. Surprisingly, he did, perks to being 6 feet 4 inches and therefore bigger than most guys. He called me some choice words and went on his way. I asked her if she was okay and she immediately thanked me for interfering. I could tell she was shook up, so I offered to give her a ride home, which she accepted. Turns out she lived just down the street from me. She thanked me again and thus began a friendship. She apologized for the way she had treated me, saying she was just playing it up for the other girls and that she had matured beyond that. Long story short, I eventually confessed my feelings towards her and she admitted that she had developed similar feelings towards me. It was confusing for her because she had never been attracted to another woman before, so it took her some time to accept it. She still claims to this day that I'm the only girl she's ever had feelings for. All of her celeb crushes are guys, and it honestly makes me proud that I was the one able to win her over. We started dating in 2016 and I proposed in February of 2018. We married last September and are currently expecting a daughter together.